Some people be like, healing journey, like, can't wait to get the off of that thing, right? There's just a lot of much deeper conversation to be had about, well, what does that even mean? The singular theme that comes up time and time again is like, guys go out and they focus on the needs of everyone but themselves. And so we like just develop this habit of losing sight of what we need to even define that. And I think that that takes time to figure those things out and then invest the time and energy in taking care of you first.
Well, Chris, it's such an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, to be able to just open up a conversation about a lot of different things. What you are doing in the world right now is so interesting and admirable to me. You are married to the one and only Mel Robbins, but you have your own path in all of this. And I have so many questions, but what the predominant question on my mind is, if, because you've had such a varied past, who would you say Chris Robbins is today?
I guess I would say maybe simplistically, just somebody who's way more aware.
Mm,
I think I say that in contrast to, well, where were you, right?
yeah,
Naturally, that's the question, where were you? And
yeah.
um, I think for many years I was in a fog,
Mm,
and not like just not paying attention or focused on things outside of me mostly. Let's put it that way.
yeah.
A lot of attention on what's external and
Mm.
beyond me. And so that has definitely been a big pendulum swing for me in my, I guess, evolution as a
Yeah.
as a human.
And that's been a good swing, right?
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
remarkable for sure. And we all have our ebbs and flows where naturally things are up and things are down, but I'm in a much more contented place than where I,
Yeah.
what were for many years, for sure.
Yeah. How much do you think is, how much of that you experienced is just normal kind of human evolution, right? Like, I we're probably right in the same age bracket, I think. And so I, in my like mid 40s, have found like this natural evolution that I think happens with people, where you start to tap into the inside a little bit more, you get a little wiser, you start to realize the things that matter, and you stop chasing all the shiny objects quite as much. And it is such a beautiful, like, it's just such a weight off your shoulders. There's work to do there though. But how much do you think that is just kind of normal path for everyone versus maybe for you?
Oh, I think it's like rite of passage, human
Yeah.
nature kind of thing. And I think maybe I'm loath to admit that, for many of us, it takes at least 50 years to realize that,
Mhm.
the hero's journey that we're on is like what everybody is on, and everybody
Right.
sort of needs the time and years to pass before
Yeah.
maybe there's some, at least maybe eyes opening to
Yeah.
sort of what we were either conscious or unconscious to in years past. Yeah, I mean, I think we all have to bang our head against the wall on whatever that might look like.
And not everybody accepts that invitation, I feel like, right? I feel like some people kind of continue to hide or run from it for the rest of their life, and they never really get to go on that journey. Were you looking for the pendulum swing, or did it kind of hit you upside the head?
Oh, yeah, totally upside the head.
Yeah.
I think that I found myself in a tough spot after feeling like 25 years of uh, trying to do what certainly I grew up observing, which
Hmm.
was, uh, I said the other day that, like I grew up with Don Draper,
Yeah.
um, and um, I didn't know the other side of Don Draper when I was a kid, but um, I certainly saw somebody doing something that I thought like that was what I was supposed to do, like
Right.
go be the provider, go make the money, go And I wanted to do that, but I think I was attempting to do that for all the wrong reasons. And so after countless attempts, and then I was in the restaurant business for like 10 years, and it was an extraordinary experience, but it definitely kicked me in the mouth on many levels. And I sort of deemed it a failing. And so I think if there's that inflection point of, where did things turn around? It was like, well, I guess that was my bottom, was coming out of that feeling like, wow, I really have not actually delivered on this thing that
Society.
or that unconsciously I felt like I needed to achieve. And so that I think was really the moment. And I guess back to your question, like, do we all go through this? Does it take 50 years or whatever? I do think that we learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
And we need to have enough of those.
Right.
Have the
Yes, a
learning
lot.
sort of
Yeah.
mount up.
The tap, tap, tap until, like you said, the pendulum swings upside your head and kind of knocks you over. And I'm sure, just like everyone gets to that point where you realize what a gift that was, and what came out of that. But what did that journey look like? Like, how long did it take you from feeling what we can all relate to, utter hopelessness, utter failure, utter defeat, just that black hole, to, okay, this is all for a greater purpose. I see a different path, and there's a lot of good that's going to come out of this, because that can be a long road.
Well, I mean, some would say that that's a healing journey of sorts. And I would definitely say that I have been on that. And I think it never, on some level, I'm not sure it ever ends.
Yeah.
Really, I mean, I'm happy to be on it. And I would say
Right.
I don't know, 6 or 8 years into it, I guess, is
Yeah.
kind of how it feels for me. So maybe that's the short answer to your question, is like, well,
Yeah.
how long has it been? And I'm surprisingly really content admitting that I'm on that journey.
Yeah.
And look, for me, it's like, come on, let's be real. Like my background is not like I wasn't left in a ditch alone and,
Yes.
like shaking a tin can kind of thing. Like none
Right.
of that stuff. It's
Yeah.
a lot of it is my own, I think, psychological undoing, as much as it was, a normal guy trying to make it happen and maybe losing sight of, what's here.
Right. But I think that's so important to, voice that, because pain is pain, depression is depression, hopelessness is hopelessness, no matter if because I think a lot of times, for many years, I told myself, like, I don't know what's wrong with me. I had like as normal childhood as you can get. I mean, as you get older, you realize not so normal. But I think we can sometimes shame ourselves when we have had a pretty solid, normal, quote unquote, life, that we shouldn't feel this way.
Absolutely.
And we need to acknowledge that no matter the cause, we're here, and we can't, until we acknowledge it, we can't do anything about it.
Oh my God. Yeah. Like I think that, and look, I think some of that, I wonder, I mean, I haven't done lots of sort of studying of, generational evolution and sort of things that are passed down from our own, but you and I are similar age. And so we, we grew up with parents that were experiencing probably similar things. It is a little learned.
For sure. I think so much of it is, like you said earlier, just subconscious almost. Like you can't point to an event or an act or, an abusive situation necessarily, but it's just the undercurrent of what is there on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think when I think about what I look forward to about it all, because some people be like, healing journey, like can't wait to get the fuck off of that thing. Right. I mean,
Yes.
and I think for me, there's just a lot of much deeper conversation to be had about, well, what does that even mean? And whether
Yeah.
that's, what's going on in your family, or your own definition of spirituality, or what's going on just like for your own body. Like, I mean, I think in all the work that I do, I would say that like the singular theme that comes up time and time again is like, guys go out and they focus on the needs of everyone but themselves
Mm-hmm.
for the most
Mm-hmm.
part.
Yeah.
And so we like just develop this habit of losing sight of what we need.
Yeah.
And to even define that, like for me, when I sort of like scratched on that, I'm like, I didn't even know how to kind of author what
Right.
what was truly, something that I thought was important to me. And I think that that takes time to figure those things out, and then invest the time and energy in, you know, taking care of you first.
Yeah. It's like a discovery. I can remember I got sober way back in the day when I was 21. And I remember feeling this, like, I felt like a child because I essentially emotionally was, but I would go like rollerblading and then I would go sailing because I was like, I don't even know what I like. I've been living
Mm,
in this
mm,
altered reality for so many years. And I think we need to do that as adults too, is constantly explore like what lights us up, what makes us tick. We just succumb to this, go to work, come home, make dinner, bring the kids to practice, go to sleep, wake up and it's like I've always been aware of the unfortunateness of, I feel like the average American life is really unhappy. And, if you take the average, it's not the average. It's kind of below average. People are living paycheck to paycheck. There's just not a level of joy that I feel like we are meant, and a level of connection that we are meant to live. And so when you kind of started out on this journey, you said 6 or 7 years ago, what did that look like? Because I'm the, type A Enneagram 3. And I'm like, okay, so what do we do? I wanted to-do list, and that's different for everybody. But what are some of the things that you did to start to kind of, not come out of that, but just start down that road of healing, of, getting to this place now where you're very content in life?
mm. Um, I would say there are a few things. One is like just like getting in touch with how little I was saying,
Mm,
how unexpressed I was about
mhm.
things that were going on for me. And here's a perfect example. Like I, at the time, I came out of the restaurant business, and Mel's career really started to take off in a way that required us to make different decisions about how we were going to deal with our three kids. And so
Mhm.
I sort of took on that role. And to me, in the beginning, like that was the epitome of failure.
Right. That's a
I,
very tough transition.
I was
My
like the
husband
guy
and
at
I have gone
home
through
with
that.
the
Yeah.
kids. Now, meanwhile, I had already been saying for years that I wanted to have
Mhm.
more time with my children. But as soon as that reality hits, like, be careful what you wish for. I was like, oh,
Absolutely.
my God, here I am. And this is not the sign of a successful man. And
Mhm.
so I had to move through that.
Yeah.
And I remember sharing in tears with my kids my belief I wasn't delivering on that expectation,
Right.
and didn't believe that. And coming out of that, I that even being able to share that with my own family, I would say is sort of like an example of a beginning of being able to say, hey,
Yes.
look, this is what's really going on. And, it sounds sort of silly, but at the time I was also getting certified to be a yoga instructor.
Hmm.
And that deep dive of
Yes.
training and sort of understanding about what we're listening to and
Hmm.
how much and how is it, either running our everyday, but also like
Yeah.
even on the yoga mat and just like listening to your body or listening to what's going on in your head. Um, and of course that led to me then like getting into some Buddhism and
Hmm.
like getting certified in meditation, guiding and that sort of thing. And like that whole thing was about like just keep slowing this thing down. Like it was then
Right.
that I started to recognize, okay, like there's been a lot of like heavy pace, like get it up, get it done,
Yeah.
succeed, go, like you
Yeah.
got
The
like a
restaurant,
lot
I
of
mean, the
tension, a
restaurant
lot of
industry. Yeah.
gripping, a lot of, and even before the restaurants, like it was
Yeah.
in the corporate world and
Yeah.
I was, either selling or hopping planes or whatever, but just a lot of either pushing or
Hmm.
gripping um, or resisting for that matter. And again, like I said earlier, I think I was oblivious to that a little bit. Whereas, starting to get into some of these modalities, I think had me start to wake up a little bit. And then it was
Hmm.
really then that I was like, hang on, I need something to, and this is the origin of Soul Degree, is like I created Soul Degree, this 5-day men's retreat out of an experience that I needed because
Yes.
I was
Just,
like, I didn't have meaning in my life.
hmm.
I needed some perspective to like think about, okay, well, what am I going to do next? Or how am I?
Yeah.
And I also missed, not being in the company of men, remote, being able to just kind of be me a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I've been leading these now for that journey, like about 6 years, and in California, Wyoming, Vermont,
How
and
many a year do you do?
I only do about 2 or 3 a year.
Yeah.
They always, they fill up fast because I think particularly guys that sort of see the benefit of maybe carving out a little time truly
Yeah.
for themselves, which we rarely do. And yeah, it's been cool. I mean, I've had some former professional athletes and obviously plenty of guys that have been, that are veterans, been on tours of duty, some entrepreneurs, but just like guys from age 22 to almost 70
That's
from
so cool.
all like walks of life and different backgrounds and coming together for kind of one purpose, which is what I
Hmm.
needed, was to like be in the company of some men, talk about, okay, this is really what's going on. This is how I'm feeling. This is where sort of where I'm taking stake, if you will, and then
Hmm.
thinking about like, well, what is next? Because I mean,
Right.
it's not like we're always at a crossroads, but often the swirl is fast
Yeah.
paced enough at this point in our lives that there's often change going on, whether we've moved or we're relationships going on, or,
Hmm.
it's like we're retiring or we're starting a new job or whatever that thing might be. It's rare that we actually like try to just stop everything and
Right. Well, and
do
I
it.
think so often people aren't even aware that they're kind of barreling through the crossroads, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
we never take the time to step back. And for me, it's always been, I mean, can look back now. Of course, I thought my life was over when I had to get sober at 21. But because I got sober at 21 from a really young age, I've always sought that. I've always kind of done that. I've stepped out of my life. I remember when I was dating my husband, I think we were both like 25, getting ready to get married. Like everyone thought I was really weird because I was like, I'm going to go down to another city and stay in a hotel for 2 days to contemplate my life,
Mhm.
but I was aware of stepping out of my life is the only way that I can really look into it and, decide with intention and time and space, what's important to me? What do I want to create? What are those goals? And it's amazing to me how few people do that. And, I've led retreats for years through work. And so it's bringing women together, coaches. So that's kind of in that personal growth space. But every time I'm at a business retreat, I'm like, every single person needs this. You know, they need to step away for 2 days and get intentional and get connected and get vulnerable, because that's really where we can make those decisions to then go back into our lives and live differently.
Yeah.
And there's so much less of that for men, you know, so much less of that. And it's interesting that this conversation's happening today, because I was just connecting. I was in a conversation yesterday with a friend of mine. He's a young brain science doctor. I love brain science. And I had no idea that his father had committed suicide until he put up a post and shared, you know, just kind of honoring men in the struggle and in the silence that so many men live in, because there's just not a safe place, or it's not societally accepted to, you know, admit pain, admit struggle. And just what you're doing is so commendable. It really is.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I do feel that, you know, there's some things out there that I read that it just, I don't want to believe that there's, that men in particular may be struggling, but I think that there's plenty of evidence that suggests, not to say that women are doing better if you're looking at, you know, male, female, but
It's more accepted.
there is a lot of displacement going on with men and, you know, their sort of identity or roles in the household, or you know, earning potential, or even like the crumbling of sort of like things like religion and
Yeah.
organized, you know, groups like that.
Yeah. Think
I
about it.
do
Our
hear,
fathers were at Kiwanis and, you know, the whatever those old school organizations were for men, that they used to go to things like that on a regular basis. It was like everybody was part of, you know, these different organizations back in the day. And you just don't see that as much anymore.
yeah, it's true. Well, it is, I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly the pacing of it all does seem to pick up, maybe with the things like technology and what all these other things, FOMO, I guess, being one of,
Right.
you know, one of those things that, like, bringing society down. But I do hear that, you know, from a lot of women, that they don't believe there's a lot of this out there. I think it's changing a little bit, though. I think
Yeah.
both the maybe things that are being offered, but also a slow sort of warming up to this notion that what is going on inside matters, and that the more we kind of hold on to it, or hold it up in our own head or heart for that matter, like, we really are running serious well-being risks.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and it's so interesting. My mind's like just kind of spinning, and it's not necessarily masculine, feminine, although I've heard it referred to for decades as the masculine or the feminine within, you know, women and within men. But it's not necessarily a tapping in or a balancing of the two. It's really just the whole person. It's the whole being, right? And that can get tricky in marriage to kind of maneuver through that. And I think so often, you know, for me, being type A driven, successful, you know, I can be very masculine in my, you know, business, and that's how I succeed and that's how I achieve. And then it's hard for me to be the vulnerable one, you know? And so is that masculine, feminine, or is that just kind of the person? And then with men, it's like you see both ends of the spectrum out there, right? You see like men need to be men and tap into their masculinity and, you know, break things and knock things over, whatever. And then it's like, but do you know what I mean? It's like this messaging that's out there in the world. But then there's also this side of vulnerability and truth speaking. And that's why I'm saying I don't think it's a feminine thing. I think it's just a human thing.
Yeah.
But it seems to me that there are two very far ends of the spectrum that I see kind of out there. And tell me a little bit more about Soul Degree. I know it's the retreats that you run 2 or 3 times a year. Do you do anything outside of that? And, is there processes that you take them through? What does that look like?
Well, I mean, on retreat, I think that there's a few main objectives. One is to step into a container of 12 guys away from it all, as you say, like step out of what is really going on, and maybe put on a different set of lenses. There are structured conversations and lots of unstructured ones. But I think some of the structured conversation is driving at guys being able to, through telling their own stories, if you will, and maybe bringing with them what is truly going on in their respective journey. Because I do encourage that, right? Like if you're going to go take 5 days out with 12 other guys, like put the time to work, like go to task on something that really matters to you.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like go golfing.
Right. Right.
And so that's not to say that you have to have some massive life problem, but it's a good forum in which to be able to say, like, this is what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so some of that conversation is, helps elevate that and expose that and get it circling in the midst of this safe environment where people can kind of be themselves a little bit. And then, things like yoga and meditation, and, we do a good amount of just hiking, nothing crazy, but like, we're putting backpacks on and going out for 10 miles a day or what have you. And it's just, it is a good backdrop for men to be able to dive deeper into things that are really going on, or share that perspective that's happening. And certainly, just being around the table together or around the fire together, some of which might be structured, some of it might be like unstructured, but allowing, again, just every moment, like either allowing room for people to really continue to like slow down their nervous system, attention to the bird chirping in the tree, to, hey, let's have this conversation about what you mentioned about the fact that, you're losing your mother and father right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the retreats are, and there's some writing and some reading, and also, like I said before, it's like, it's not all heavy and deep, and like, we're there to have some fun, have some laugh. Like that also goes part and part with stepping outside of life. It's like, get off the fucking escalator. And
Find some
loosen
joy.
that tie, for sure. But also like have that occur inside of, understanding our own humanity and and sharing what's true.
Yeah.
Which, again, to your point, maybe it's not always in our nature to go do that, particularly not with guys that we don't know, or particularly not like in a strange environment, like the woods somewhere. So I get,
I think it's probably a safer environment because they don't know, it's like, I can remember I started facilitating groups about 8 years ago online. And I remember thinking, I'm not doing any, like, online sounded so cold to me.
Yeah.
And I remember being just blown away at the honesty and vulnerability. And I thought, what is happening? Like, I don't understand. Women are just sharing everything. And I was like, oh, because it is online, because they don't know each other.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was a very
Well,
safe
that's the other
place.
thing that I am doing for the first time. I have not done this ever before, but I am launching a program online, a year-long program. I'm calling it the Huddle.
I love that.
Just for guys to take 90 minutes once a month
Yeah.
to huddle up and try to do some of this, like try to
Yep.
like, okay, let's draw the blinds on
Hmm.
everything else. Let's take this moment, and it'll be thematic. So I'll try to, my intention is to sort of weave some important themes through some books that I'll be proposing and some writing prompts. I mean, it's not going to be an onerous kind of, let me add something to your to-do list, but it's more like me time.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, but to do it, um, and I realize, digital is digital. It's not the same thing as sitting around the snap, crackle, and, pop
Yeah.
of a fire. But it like gets back to the need that I think
Yeah.
we have to stop, like
Absolutely.
try to stop. And I realize stopping in front of a monitor, looking into a screen is maybe a lot of what we feel like we're doing. But at least in this conversation in the huddle, the intention is to help guys give thought to how to find a little more meaning and fulfillment in what they're
Yeah.
up to, outside of whatever might feel like the everyday.
Yeah. And it's so important to just have that consistency, like you said, of once a month. And honestly, it's the only way we can do it this day and age. My son, he's 15, and I kept wanting him to join a small group, and we kept trying it. It would never work. It would never work, no matter what season, no matter what time of day, no matter what day of the
Mhm.
week. And then we finally had somebody to reach out, and I was like, oh, I really want him to do this. And the leader said, well, I'm going to do Zoom calls, even though they're all in town. He's like, I'm going to do a Zoom call Wednesday night at 9 o'clock once a week, and we'll get together once a month. And I was like, that's brilliant, because everybody can do that. We can't all get together in
Sure.
person on a
Yeah.
weekly basis. So
And that's kind
it's
of the
powerful.
inspiration there, is just
Yeah.
like not everybody can come on retreat, and I totally get it. And I'm definitely somebody that um it, is enjoys a more intimate moment
Hmm.
than thinking that more is better. But at the same time, I think this conversation or the guys having a little bit more fluidity and comfort in having conversations about soulful matters, if you will,
Hmm.
is what I want to be doing. And
Right.
so, to the extent that maybe this huddle is a way to open the doors for a few more, I mean, that's the hope,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah. I love that so much. So much. Let me ask you this,
Mm.
because this is really a personal question, kind of, but I'm sure it comes up in so many relationships. You kind of going through this metamorphosis, this change, which was, really different from the life, say, you were living 10 years ago. And we had talked about this right before we started recording. Sometimes there can be this struggle with husband and wife, and it can totally go both ways. So I deal and work with a lot of powerful women that, or not even necessarily powerful women. I want to say women, there's two sides to this. Women that are very interested in the personal growth space. They're kind of living in that space, and their husbands are like rolling their eyes, this is malarkey, this is crazy. And so my first question is, what would you offer them to kind of nudge their husbands, or is it more attraction rather than promotion? Sometimes there becomes that divide when one person, male or female, starts to grow and starts to evolve and starts to really do the work, and the other partner isn't. What would you say from a male perspective?
Um, I, I say this because it is on my mind, and Mel and I have been doing it of late, and I really like it. But this, if you follow her on social, she talks about like doing the 3 wins.
Hmm.
Have you heard about this?
Yes.
The idea of being able to have a not structured or heated conversation about like, well, what went well, or what are you psyched about or proud of in the last 24 hours? Same thing in the last 60 days. And then
Yeah.
what are you looking forward to, or what are you trying to make happen. And, it sounds like something that on the surface, like, oh, I could only talk about that once a week or what have you, but actually doing it on a more
Yeah.
regular basis helps really just open those sort of
Yeah.
communication waves, if you
Right.
those channels of like, hey, what's going on for you?
Yeah.
And that's very different than, hey, you should listen to Mel Robbins, or
Yeah.
or this podcast, or read this
Yes.
book. And
Yes.
man, what a bummer that you're not following Tony Robbins or whatever. Like,
Right.
I think that
That's
um
so powerful, Chris, because, my husband has his own business. I have my own business. And I also have this kind of unwritten script of, I mean, he kind of knows what's going on in my business, but a lot of times when he comes home, I think I'm trying to leave business aside. But just like you said, maybe there was a person I connected with today, or maybe there was a conversation I had, or a project I'm thinking about launching, and just allowing that conversation I mean, that's on it, especially on a daily basis, connects you so much more, you know?
I do. And I think that there's, I think another thing that is pretty expansive is like this whole concept that everybody talks about with gratitude. And even just being proactive about
Mm-hmm.
engaging in conversation about what you are grateful for, or including the act of like sharing what you're seeing or feeling. I mean, look, you need to lead by example.
Right.
So if you're like, damn, my husband's not that thoughtful or
Mm-hmm.
emotive, or, he's not, walking down the personal growth path. Well, I think to a large extent, lead with what's going on for you. And
Right.
if you're, for example, feeling gratitude for things in your life
Mm-hmm.
along the way and sharing those, there you may find there's a sort of a reciprocity or a warming
Yes.
of that, and a desire to want to, it takes time. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think that
Right.
the actions on your own behalf, again, I don't mean to like put it back in the lap of the woman who's
No,
hoping that their man, takes more interest in this, but
yeah, but I
uh,
agree. I think sometimes, when I work with women that are like, kind of down the spectrum of like really angry, frustrated, pissed off about, I'm like, and how much on the personal growth path are you? Because if those are the emotions that are coming up, then you're really not doing the work that you should be, like you said, leading by example.
which I would say is easier said than done, because most of us didn't grow up necessarily in environments where that was all being modeled.
Right.
That
Yeah.
that sort of self-reflection, or a curiosity of who we are, where we came from, all these things. Like,
Hmm.
I don't know that
No.
I mean, I had some of that in my upbringing, but it didn't take root right away. I was still like a freak show, insecure, like
Yeah.
trying to please everyone kind of guy
Yeah.
for so many years.
Well, and that makes me think of parlaying this question into kids, right? Because children, of course, I'm like, I need you to read these 12 books in the next 12 months, because as somebody in this space, we understand books and philosophies and certain concepts. I mean, if you can get them young, you are so far ahead of the game.
Mm.
But of course, I've had to, just kind of sit back and think, okay, I'm just going to pray that it's getting through to them through osmosis, because they are not, anytime I've tried to implement anything, I'm like, this is not working. And so I've kind of had to back off. But how do you handle that with your kids? Is it just kind of like, hopefully they'll pick up on some of this? Or, I mean, do you ever?
Well, our youngest is 17, so
Yeah.
we're kind of right. Like, isn't that what they say? There's nothing else you can do. No, I'm
Right.
kidding.
Well, that's why I'm
Uh,
asking. I'm like, you're about 5 years ahead of me. So give me the cliff notes.
I, um, I I would say based on both Mel's and my's upbringing and maybe some of our reflections or realizations about kind of who we've become as a result of our
Mhm.
childhood. I mean, some of that plays out naturally. We're always like, oh, I'm going to do it differently than how mom did it or how dad did it.
Yeah.
And, there's some of that, but I think that um, maybe what shifted in us being parents of our kids is that we really wore a lot of our breakdown on our
Mhm.
like that was very front and center, and we were
Yeah.
willing to um and even when the kid's 7, like there's
Yeah.
still, I think sometimes there's this tendency to like we got to hide it, we got
Mhm.
to look strong, we're the parent, blah blah blah. And I think whether we intended to hide it or not, we didn't do a good job of that. And so subsequently, there's a lot of like transparency and openness and
Yeah.
caring and, like being around the dining room table and playing high low,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yep.
And speaking your high, but then like being in tears over your low in front of your
Yeah.
like 10-year-old. I mean,
But what a beautiful thing for them to be able to see. And I feel like I did have parents that they didn't fight a lot, but I saw them fight. And I can remember the messaging was kind of like, it's, if somebody says they never fight or never argue, like then, that's a crock. Like that's not reality. And really getting that message as a kid, but also like no matter what we go through, no matter how angry your father and I are with each other, we're going to get through it. That's not negotiable. And so it was like, oh, the emotions were, it was still safe, as a child. Like even if they were arguing, I didn't feel unsafe. I wasn't unsure of the future. And I think that's so important to model for our kids that, it's okay to experience the up downs and all arounds and the breakdowns and the hard times. And, so many kids, I think, are coming out of childhood just kind of like a lot of people did in our generation where, everything's perfect on the outside. Let's not talk about what's going on the inside.
and setting maybe false expectations
Right.
for ourselves about what we think we need to, live into.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I would say that's the only other thing, like Mel and I talk a lot about, is just um, it sounds silly, but like just reminding them that, we love you exactly like
Mhm.
how you are, what's going on, and trying to take the pressure off this
Yeah.
notion that there is something they need to do or need to achieve, if you will. And it's a fine line. Like, part of
Mhm.
you as a parent setting up guardrails is trying to inspire them to go after things and
Mhm.
be okay with the breakdown or the failure or what have you. Again, easier said than done, but and I would say that's another thing that is maybe not something we consciously thought of, but the more and more I think about it as the older my kids get, is just being able to try to, part of that guardrail setting is like trying to have them really zero in on the things that they're
Right.
into,
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Foster their
they are
talents and
finding
desires.
some sort of like, man, I just love doing this thing,
Yeah.
and nurturing that to the extent,
Yes.
even if it's out of, well, hang on, I grew up and you're supposed to go play lacrosse at the
Right.
D1 school and you've got to do this thing. And it's like, I don't know, man, if they're into, if they're into piano,
Yeah. Absolutely. You got to
be
get on
kind,
board
be
as a parent.
graceful, and
Yeah.
let them run with that, because that is
Yeah.
just, that does seem to, like, as we see that sort of playing out with our kids, and
Yeah.
I'm not even sure we were consciously trying to foster that, but it's beautiful to see.
Yeah. And I think there is somewhat of a fine line between nurturing their talents and desires and putting pressure on there, because isn't it crazy? I mean, and maybe this is just me because I did grow up type A, the best at sports and the best at this and all the things. But I can remember having small children and saying to one of my best friends said her child was struggling with something. And she's like, I just want to have an average kid. And I thought, what? Like, I want to have the best, smartest, pro athlete. And I thought, what is wrong with me? Because as parents, you can't help but have this unconscious desire or conscious desire for them to be the best in the drama or the best student or the best athlete. And I'm very well aware of how much, even though my parents didn't put that on me, society gave me. When you are rewarded and you're achieving at a young age, that pressure is a lot when you step into the teen years to keep that up,
Yeah, it's true. And it it never really kind of ends, depending on
Right.
how good we are at like turning it off.
Right. Oh my gosh. Well, this is such a great conversation. I love every part of it. I want to tell everybody where they can find you, where they can find information about your retreats, the huddle, all of that good stuff. I'll put it all in the show notes, but let me know where we can find you.
Yeah, I mean, it's all pretty much at souldegree.com. I'm also Soul Degree on Instagram, and learning my ways about the social media space. It's not unlike my talented marketing wife. I don't get up every day and run to social media, so I'm learning there. But souldegree.com, you can find information about these 3 retreats coming up this May, June, and September in Vermont.
Awesome.
And then there's information there also about the Huddle. And I'm not sure when this is airing, probably long after this little webinar that I'm hosting the 14th. And then this Huddle kicks off on the 28th of this month.
Okay. Well, we might be able to push this out in time for that.
Well, don't do it on my on behalf of me, but yeah, hosting a webinar next Wednesday to just sort of introduce this, a free webinar just to introduce the Huddle itself, and then we'll get started the end of this month.
That's awesome. Awesome. Well, Chris, thank you for your time. Thank you for your presence, and just such a beautiful conversation, and just keep doing what you're doing because the world needs it.
No, I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to share a little bit about it.